This is Billionaire Mondays. Every Monday, we present you with another billionaire. Today, we're looking at 15 things you didn't know about Muammar Gaddafi. Welcome to alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get informed. Hello, Aluxers. We bet you clicked this video pretty fast. As you can see from the title, today we're talking about one of the most controversial figures that until recently was the president of Libya. Yes, we're digging into the life of the late leader Muammar Gaddafi. The infamous dictator was born into a Bedouin family from Libya and went to the Royal Military Academy of Benghazi. That was the place where he planned his career and where his ideas grew even stronger. He was an Arab nationalist, an extremist, but obsessed with power and money. He took the presidency after a coup d'etat he organized when he was only 18 years old, and he ruled for the next 42 years until his death, and led the country to a complete disaster, international bans, and civil war. Today, Libya is a hostile place, still at war, and still struggling to recover after all the years of uncertainty and dictatorship. As for Gaddafi, for some he was a blessing and others a curse. But we're going to let his acts and the facts do the talking, and you guys can judge afterwards. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Alux. He was surely a controversial and radical figure, but we're going to focus on the lifestyle and the wealth that was behind all of it. Number 1. He was spending $2.2 million per month on parties only. Some leaders are more powerful than others. Gaddafi was among those that were very powerful and very rich. His entire life, he gained and spent millions and millions of dollars on him, his lifestyle, and his family. He was always traveling in style, dressed well, and had everything he needed. It is said that although he was an avid Arab supporter and a nationalist, he did enjoy a harem, women's company, alcohol, and parties. Gaddafi was spending as much as $2.2 million each month on lavish parties. That's more than $25 million per year, so the parties must have been fancier and crazier than those of Gatsby's. Number 2. During his time, petrol in Libya was 15 cents a liter. Media has a strange way of showing only one side of a story. It's always been like that, and since Libya has been through some difficult times, the news is seldom biased. Gaddafi did a lot of good for his people and his country, but it's not shown in the international press because of their foreign policies and the country's human rights violations. Although the country might look like a battlefield, during his 42 years as president, the main natural resource was oil. He nationalized all the refineries, cut down imports and middlemen, so the prices were extremely low and they had no external debt. A liter of oil was as low as 15 cents in Libya, and it was still profitable and accessible. Only Venezuela has better prices than Libya, with 3 cents per gallon. Number 3. He had a golden statue of his daughter made. Gaddafi had 10 children in total, 8 sons and 2 daughters. 2 of them were adopted, so only 8 of them were legitimate. Out of all of his legitimate offspring, 3 died and others were either in asylum or imprisoned. Sadly, most of them didn't get another chance after their father died. His daughter Aisha was somehow luckier. She is the only legitimate daughter of Gaddafi and his second wife that was granted asylum in Oman. She's a lawyer, a UN ambassador, and has served as a mediator for her country. After Gaddafi died and his house was taken over by the rebels, they found a mermaid-shaped golden couch and a big golden statue of her. Aisha was very beautiful and has been called many times as Claudia Schiffer of the Arabs, so it's no wonder that her father wanted to keep her beauty eternal. Number 4. He was involved in the African slave trade. Some of the most controversial things that Libya and Gaddafi were accused of was the African slave trade. Technically, the slave days were long gone and abolished, but somehow they managed to squeeze into Libya. Due to the country's location, it's widely used by African migrants to get to Europe in the hope of a better life. Unfortunately for many of them, Libya and Gaddafi took advantage of their location and turned it into a cruel slave trading point. This action brought a lot of sanctions and penalties to Libya, but it seems that it's all in vain, since it's still going on to this day. Gaddafi did apologize on behalf of his country for the slave trade because he was a strong believer of a unified African continent and even a common currency that will free them from foreign help. Number 5. His net worth was estimated to have been around $200 billion. Gaddafi took the presidency officially when he was 26 years old. He developed his political views and ideas, and since he gained so much power at a pretty young age, he didn't struggle too much making a fortune. As the president and leader of Libya, he was the main authority of every institution. He was also the richest man in the country and in the world, with a net worth of roughly $200 billion. At the time of his death in October 2011, he was the richest man that died. Not even Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos had such a big fortune. All of the money was made by owning oil resources, trade, and gold in Libya. He even had money in offshore accounts and all sorts of investments. The only sad thing is, he stole that money from his own country. He did not work for it. Number 6. He was accused of sexual assault and rape by various women. Like many Arab men, Gaddafi enjoyed the privilege Islam gives to men. He married twice, he had a harem, a full army of women bodyguards, and women's company as often as he wanted, including minors. Throughout the years, many women came forward with allegations of rape and assault. Some of them are quite aggressive because it looks like he used to choose women and have kept them as sex slaves in his home. He was never judged for any of these allegations, but we can assume he thought he was entitled to have them. The craziest things we found out is that he had a special underground medical facility where women that he raped were getting abortions, which sounds horrible and like complete torture. Number 7. He may have planned the bombing of a Pan Am airplane that killed 270 people. Gaddafi was definitely no saint, and certainly not loved by other leaders, not even those in Africa. His vision of Libya was a country 100% independent and prosperous. He achieved that in a way, but he also attracted a lot of hate and bans from the UN, EU, and USA. Going against everyone, Gaddafi definitely took his beliefs a little too far. Back in the 1980s, he still wanted to unite with their neighbor countries and was conducting a very anti-Western policy. When a Pan Am flight was shot down in Scotland and the authorities identified the suspects as being 2 Libyan citizens, Gaddafi refused to turn them in. As a result, the UN imposed a series of economic sanctions that caused Libya a loss of $1 billion. If you protect terrorists, then you are a terrorist. Number 8. His dead body was kept on display for days in Tripoli. By now, you guys might already have a mental picture of Gaddafi. Although his life was torn between his love for his country and his own demons, the last years of his life were not so good. He was being overthrown from power, and in a series of battles, he was found hiding in a pipe and killed on October 11, 2011. Unfortunately, since the rebels hated him so much, they turned his death into a circus. Gaddafi's body was kept in a public freezer and on display for days so everyone could see him, an act highly criticized by international organizations and leaders. They refused his family a private funeral and went on to bury him in an unknown place in the desert. Some claim he did get a secret funeral, but nothing worthy of the luxurious life he had or his title as president. Number 9. He was very vain and considered himself as a fashion icon. He was always wearing silk, cashmere, and fashionable combinations along with golden jewelry. He really loved to dress up and have expensive things because he was quite vain and also liked being admired. At one point, he declared that he is a fashion icon and everything he does and wears becomes hyped instantly. And with him being an Arab leader, we don't know who was copying his style except for other Arab leaders. Number 10. He lived in the most extravagant houses. With a fortune of $200 billion, you can imagine the luxury Gaddafi and his family were living in. He was the richest man in the world at the time of his death, and the amount of luxury possessions he had is insane. He had 3 houses, 3 private jets, and luxury cars. This without mentioning his wardrobe and jewelry collection. The biggest house and his main residence was the Tripoli mansion. It was a huge house, decorated with expensive furniture, huge swimming pools, and of course, a tent, because even in his own house, Gaddafi still lived in a tent. He also bought a $10 million house in central London and a $1 million house in New Jersey. Other than that, he owned 3 private luxury jets worth $187 million and a luxury car he designed himself. After his death, the Tripoli house was destroyed, robbed, and the rebels posted pictures on the internet so people could see the wealth Gaddafi lived in. Number 11. He hired Beyoncé for a private party. Gaddafi's lavish parties were really expensive. Although a big percentage of Libya's population were living in poverty, he was enjoying his best life. Because parties can get boring and repetitive, Gaddafi started inviting top performers like Beyoncé, Mariah Carey, Lionel Richie, or Usher. Thanks to WikiLeaks, we now know our favorite celebrities entertained such parties and that the fees were paid with dirty money. After the news broke into the media a few years ago, Beyoncé stated she donated all of the money she got from Gaddafi to the Haiti earthquake victims. She reportedly received $2 million from Gaddafi's son for her private performance. Number 12. He always traveled with a huge bulletproof tent. One of the craziest things among the escort of female bodyguards was the fact that Gaddafi only traveled with his private planes and his own bulletproof tent. Being born and raised in a Bedouin family, he was used to a nomadic lifestyle, so he always lived in a tent. Even at his private residence, he had an underground tent where he stayed most of the time. He took his tent with him everywhere, even in the States, and used it for meetings, photo shoots, and everything else he might have needed. He had chefs with him that would make food, bodyguards, officials, family, and all the furniture he needed. He even camped his tent on Donald Trump's property. Now that's what we call a homey feeling. Number 13. His bodyguards had gold-plated guns and rifles. We've mentioned before that Gaddafi's escort of bodyguards was 100% female, but not regular females. They had to be virgin females. As we dig deeper into Gaddafi's life, it seems like he was quite a picky person. We can only imagine how difficult, stressing, and dangerous it must have been to work for him. But because he had such a luxurious lifestyle, he wanted his staff to feel the same. After his death, at his Tripoli house, the rebels found golden-plated guns and rifles used by his bodyguards. Maybe it was his way of showing gratitude and consolation for not wearing jewelry for his lady guardians, because we can't figure out why on earth they needed golden guns. Number 14. He had plastic surgery done without anesthetic. Gaddafi was once thought to be a very handsome man. Looking at his pictures when he was young really makes us wonder how it all changed and why. As the years went by, his looks changed dramatically, so everyone started to ask questions. And it looks like he got some nip and tuck to his face. As his former doctor says, he did it without any anesthetic. His mission was to make Gaddafi look younger using only local anesthesia because he wanted to be awake and conscious during the procedure that was conducted in a bunker. He was so calm during the surgery that he ordered hamburgers and ate them halfway through. Number 15. Silvio Berlusconi was inspired by his orgies. Silvio Berlusconi and Muammar Gaddafi had a long-lasting friendship. Libya was a former Italian colony, and it was obvious that the two still stayed in touch, and thinking of how much oil Libya had, it was quite a good friendship to hang on to. In fact, the relationship between these two extended far over business and politics. Berlusconi found out about Gaddafi's lavish and extravagant parties, and supposedly that's where he got his inspiration for his own parties that were named Bunga Bunga. Both leaders seemed to enjoy the company and services of much younger girls and dirty money. Well, Aluxers, that's a wrap on Muammar Gaddafi. As we said before, we've listed the facts, the numbers, the good and the bad, and you guys can make your own opinions and judgments. After all, both sides are biased, and we can see propaganda in the news, and sometimes it's not always the truth. Seeing all the richness he lived in, does it make you think any less of him? Should a leader be rich or modest? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And of course, for sticking with us all the way to the end, you get a bonus that explains how Gaddafi managed to be so rich. Number 16. He owned and controlled the Libyan National Bank. Most presidents don't have too much power. They're more like an international representation of the country. And to make it even worse, they're not very well paid either, a little over your average salary. Gaddafi was not your usual president, though. He was the highest and only authority in Libya. He did whatever reform he wanted to, and one of them was to nationalize the Bank of Libya and put it under his control. He even stated that Libya is his country and that everything belongs to him. Quite ambitious and true, as we've seen so far. In 2011, the National Bank of Libya had 143 tons of gold in its vaults, which is the equivalent of $5.5 billion. Thank you for spending some time with us, Aluxers. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpicked these videos, which we recommend you watch next. Thank you for being an Aluxer, and we'll see you back tomorrow.